The faster-than-light tests exceeded beyond all projections. Sarah's theoretical framework held perfectly, and Marcus's piloting skills brought them home safely after humanity's first journey beyond light speed. The accomplishment sent ripples across Earth's communication networks and, unknown to them, triggered alerts across the galaxy. Ambassador Zealith arrived 3 months later, his ship materializing near Earth's moon with little fanfare. He was a career diplomat from the Kryn Federation, experienced in first contact protocols, and confident this would be another routine integration. The humans would be awed by superior technology, grateful for guidance, and eager to join the Galactic Order. He was wrong on all counts. The first meeting took place at the newly constructed Unity Center in Geneva. Sarah and Marcus had been selected as humanity's primary representatives, their successful faster-than-light mission making them symbols of human achievement. Sarah handled the technical discussions while Marcus managed the diplomatic nuances, and Zealith quickly realized these humans were far more organized than he had expected. "Your offer is generous," Sarah said, reviewing the integration treaty on her tablet. "Access to medical technology, agricultural improvements, and limited faster-than-light capabilities. But I notice some significant restrictions." Zealith spread his wings in what he hoped was a reassuring gesture. "Standard protocols, Dr. Mitchell. New species must be guided carefully. Advanced technology can be dangerous in inexperienced hands." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "So we trade independence for safety? We accept junior status and follow rules we had no part in creating." "It is how the system works," Zealith replied, feeling a flicker of irritation. 10,000 species have integrated successfully using these protocols. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a glance that Zealith couldn't quite interpret. There was communication happening between them that transcended words, something Zealith found unsettling. "We'll need time to discuss this with our people," Sarah said finally. "This isn't a decision we can make alone." The discussions continued for weeks. Zealith found himself spending increasing amounts of time with Sarah and Marcus, and despite his initial reservations, he began to appreciate their perspective. They asked questions that challenged his assumptions. They proposed modifications to the treaty that were creative without being confrontational. And they clearly cared deeply about making the right choice for their species. He also noticed something else. The way Marcus's eyes followed Sarah when she was lost in thought. How Sarah's formal demeanor softened when Marcus made one of his dry jokes. The small touches that lingered a moment too long. These two humans were falling in love, and Zealith found himself hoping they would find happiness, even as he worried about what humanity would mean for the galaxy. Humanity accepted the treaty after 6 months of negotiation, but they did so on their own terms, having secured modifications that gave them more autonomy than any species in galactic history. Zealith reported the successful integration to Chancellor Vorith, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that he had just set something monumental in motion. On Earth, as celebrations erupted worldwide, Marcus found Sarah on the observation deck, watching stars she would soon visit. "We did it," he said softly. She turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We changed everything." He took her hand, and this time neither of them pretended it was just friendship. "Together." "Corridor opening at Mark 37, Sarah called out, her eyes fixed on her displays. "All ships follow my lead." Adjusting shield harmonics to compensate for the gamma radiation spike. Marcus flew with absolute precision, threading the ship through gaps in the storm that appeared and disappeared in seconds. Behind him, the fleet followed, some ships handling the turbulence better than others. Twice, vessels fell out of formation, their shields flickering dangerously before Sarah managed to transmit emergency adjustments that brought them back online. 3 hours into the transit, Varric suddenly cried out, his bioluminescence flashing red. "Gravitational anomaly forming directly ahead. It's massive like nothing in the projections." Sarah's fingers flew across her console, pulling up data that made her blood run cold. A micro-black hole was forming, its gravity well already beginning to pull them in. The nebula's chaotic energy had created something that shouldn't exist, a tear in spacetime itself. "Can we go around?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with controlled tension. "Not without losing 3 ships to the peripheral storms," Sarah replied. She was running calculations faster than she ever had, her mind working through possibilities and rejecting them just as quickly. "We need to go through." "Through a black hole?" Varrix's lights flickered with panic. "Through its gravity well," Sarah corrected. "Marcus, I need you to accelerate directly toward it. Maximum thrust." "Sarah. Trust me. The gravity will slingshot us around if we hit it at the right angle and speed." It's called a gravitational assist. Humans used to do it with planets back when we had primitive spacecraft. Marcus didn't hesitate. All ships match our speed and trajectory. Whatever happens, stay in formation. The determination shot forward, directly toward the swirling death that waited ahead. Every alarm on the ship screamed. The hull groaned under stress it was never designed to handle. Sarah made constant adjustments to the shields, reshaping them into an aerodynamic profile that could slice through the gravitational distortion. The moment they hit the edge of the gravity well was like being grabbed by a giant hand and thrown across the cosmos. The ship spun, twisted, and accelerated to speeds that pushed the inertial dampeners to their limit. For 5 eternal seconds, they hung on the edge of being pulled into oblivion. Then they were through, catapulted forward by the black hole's gravity with such force that they covered 3 hours of travel in 30 seconds. Behind them, one by one, the other ships followed the same trajectory. One Thanex vessel misjudged the angle and had to fire emergency thrusters to compensate, but Sarah's quick thinking with a remote shield adjustment kept them from being torn apart. All 20 ships emerged intact on the other side. "Status report," Marcus called, his voice shaking slightly from the adrenaline. The reports came in. Damaged systems, overwhelmed crews, several minor injuries, but everyone had made it. Against all odds and reason, they had survived. 15 more hours to the far side, Sarah said, collapsing back in her chair. Her hands were trembling, and she felt simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. "If we can do that 17 more times, we'll be fine." Marcus laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "You're insane. You know that, right?" "I learned from the best," she replied, echoing his earlier words. The remainder of the transit was merely extremely dangerous rather than impossible. They faced plasma storms that turned space into a sea of fire, magnetic pulses that tried to scramble every computer system, and pockets of exotic matter that behaved in ways that violated known physics. Each time, Sarah adapted the shields and Marcus flew with inhuman precision, and each time the fleet made it through. When they finally emerged on the far side of the nebula, 18 hours after entering, every crew member sat in stunned silence. They had done it. They had crossed the uncrossable. "All ships, sensor sweep," Marcus ordered, his professional demeanor returning. "Let's make sure we're where we're supposed to be." The sensors confirmed their position, deep in Dravik territory, 20 light-years behind their front lines, and less than 2 light-years from Station Korvax, their primary supply depot. Sarah opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Dr. Mitchell. I want to say that what you just did was extraordinary. You trusted human ideas, human technology, and human leadership to take you through something that every textbook said would kill you. You proved that the galaxy's greatest strength isn't military might or ancient wisdom. It's the willingness to try something new when everything else has failed. Now let's finish what we started." The attack on Station Korvax was anticlimactic compared to the Nebula crossing. The Draviks had left the station lightly defended, never imagining anyone could approach from that direction. The human-led fleet destroyed the supply depot's shield generators and strategic stockpiles within 20 minutes, then withdrew before reinforcements could arrive. The return trip through the nebula, while still dangerous, felt almost routine compared to the first crossing. They knew what to expect now, and Sarah's shields had been refined based on the lessons learned. They emerged back into friendly space after 16 hours, exhausted but triumphant. The impact of the raid was immediate and devastating to the Dravik advance. Cut off from their supplies and faced with an enemy that could apparently strike from impossible directions, the Dravik commanders lost their confidence. Their offensive stalled, then began a slow withdrawal as the Galactic Council's reinforcements arrived from the outer territories. Within 3 months, the Draviks had sued for peace, their military ambitions shattered by the realization that they faced opponents who refused to play by conventional rules. The victory celebration took place back at the Galactic Council, and this time humans were not observers but heroes. Species that had questioned humanity's integration now praised their innovation. Delegates who had dismissed the Vidian warning now understood what the ancient prophets had seen. Chancellor Vorith personally presented Sarah and Marcus with the Star of Unity, the highest honor the Council could bestow. As he placed the crystals around their necks, he spoke quietly so only they could hear. "The Vidians told us humans were dangerous because you refused to accept limitations. I dismissed it as paranoia. I was wrong. You are dangerous but not because you destroy. You are dangerous because you make us question everything we thought we knew." That evening, as the celebrations continued, Marcus found Sarah on one of the observation decks, watching the stars. She had changed out of her formal attire into something more comfortable, and she looked more relaxed than he had seen her in months. "There you are," he said, joining her at the railing. "You disappeared from the party." "I needed a moment," she admitted. "It's overwhelming. 6 months ago, half the council wanted to put restrictions on human activities. Now they're calling us saviors. How do you feel about that?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "Responsible. Scared. Hopeful. We proved that human thinking can work on a galactic scale, but that means expectations just got much higher. Every time someone faces an impossible problem, they're going to turn to humans for a solution. That's a lot of pressure." Marcus took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then it's good that humans are also really good at handling pressure." She smiled and leaned against him. "Is this okay? Being public about this. Sarah, you just led a fleet through the most dangerous region of space in the galaxy, destroyed an enemy supply depot, and ended a war. I think the Council can handle us being in love." The great assembly hall of the Galactic Council hummed with anticipation, its crystalline walls reflecting the bioluminescent glow of 1,000 different life forms. Chancellor Vorith of the Kryn Federation shifted his 6 limbs nervously, his translucent wings flickering with uncertainty. In his 300 years of service, he had never witnessed what was about to occur. The Vidian prophets were coming. Ambassador Kelris leaned toward him, her serpentine body coiling with curiosity. "Do you truly believe they have something important to say? They have been silent for 12,000 cycles." Before Vorith could respond, the enormous doors at the chamber's far end began to open, moving without sound or visible mechanism. 3 figures emerged, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal, as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Vidians moved with deliberate slowness, and every representative in the hall felt an involuntary shiver of ancient recognition. The lead prophet stopped at the central platform, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to bypass all translators, speaking directly to the consciousness of every being present. "We bring warning of a species that will soon emerge into your awareness. A species called humans from a world they name Earth." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several delegates accessed their data streams, searching for information on this unknown civilization. "Their planet orbits an unremarkable star in the outer spiral arm," the Vidian continued. "They have not yet achieved faster-than-light capability. They war among themselves. They damage their own ecosystem. Yet they are the most dangerous species you will ever encounter." Delegate Morphix of the Thalen Collective rose, his crystalline body chiming with skepticism. "Honored Prophet, forgive my doubt, but we have integrated 10,000 species. What makes these primitive beings so concerning?" The Vidian turned its attention to Morphix, and even from across the vast chamber, the delegate felt the weight of that ancient gaze. "You mistake their nature. They are not dangerous because they are violent, though they can be. They are dangerous because they refuse to accept limitations. Their world tried to kill them for millions of years, and they not only survived but thrived. They conquered their planet not by adapting to it, but by forcing it to adapt to them." Images materialized above the platform, showing scenes from Earth. Humans climbing impossible mountains, diving into crushing ocean depths, racing across hostile deserts, building cities that touched the clouds. Each scene demonstrated a casual defiance of nature that made the assembled aliens uncomfortable. "Every species here evolved in relative harmony with their worlds," the Vidian explained. "You grew alongside your environments. But humans grew in spite of theirs. When they could not survive the cold, they took fire from the sky. When predators hunted them, they made weapons. When their bodies failed them, they built machines to extend their reach. They do not accept what is given. They demand what they desire." Chancellor Vorith leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we refuse them entry into the galactic community?" "We suggest nothing. We merely warn. Humans form emotional bonds with astonishing depth and breadth. They will fight to extinction for those they love. They adopt their predators as companions. They mourn creatures that cannot comprehend mourning. This emotional intensity makes them unpredictable and fiercely loyal." The chamber filled with whispers most dismissive. Ambassador Kelris spoke what many were thinking. "With respect, honored prophets, perhaps your age has made you overly cautious. We have protocols for integrating new species. Whatever unique qualities these humans possess, we are prepared." The 3 Vidians stood silent for a long moment. Then the leader spoke again, its voice dropping to something almost sad. "We have observed humans for 50,000 of your standard years. We watched them discover fire, agriculture, writing, and now space travel. Everything we tell you today understates what they are capable of. You will simply have to learn for yourselves." The prophets turned and departed as silently as they had arrived. Behind them, the council erupted into debate. Most dismissed the warning as the paranoid ramblings of a dying race. Chancellor Vorith dutifully recorded the warning in the archives and moved on to other business. 50 light-years away, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in the control room of the Artemis station, her eyes fixed on the viewing screens showing empty space. Beside her, pilot Marcus Webb checked the flight systems for the 1000th time, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "You know this could kill us, right?" Marcus said, not looking away from his instruments. Sarah smiled, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "It could. But think about what happens if it works. Humanity reaches the stars. And if it doesn't work? Then we become a cautionary tale about ambition." She turned to face him, her expression softening. "Having second thoughts?" Marcus met her gaze, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with their mission. "Not a single one. If I'm going to break physics and possibly die trying, there's no one I'd rather have calculating the equations." "Such romance," she teased, but her cheeks flushed slightly. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened under circumstances no one had anticipated. 5 years after humanity's integration, the galaxy faced its greatest existential threat in recorded history. The Dravic Empire, a militant civilization from the unexplored regions beyond the Outer Rim, had emerged with devastating force, conquering 4 star systems in a matter of weeks and showing no signs of stopping. Chancellor Vorith stood at the center of the Great Assembly Hall, his wings drooping with exhaustion. He had aged considerably since the human integration, the stress of managing their disruptive presence taking its toll. Now, faced with an enemy that seemed unstoppable, he found himself doing something he never thought he would do. He was turning to the humans for help. Dr. Sarah Mitchell entered the chamber with Commander Marcus Webb at her side. They moved with the easy confidence of 2 people who had faced impossible odds together and emerged victorious. Over the past 5 years, they had become legends in their own right. Sarah's scientific innovations had revolutionized everything from medical technology to energy production, while Marcus had led exploration missions into regions of space that other species considered too dangerous to approach. Their relationship had evolved from professional partnership to something deeper, though they kept it private, both aware that their positions made any public romance complicated. Still, everyone who worked with them could see the connection. The way they communicated with glances and subtle gestures. How they anticipated each other's thoughts and finished each other's sentences. They were a team in every sense of the word, and the galaxy had learned that betting against them was usually a mistake. "Dr. Mitchell, Commander Webb," Vorith said, his voice heavy with the weight of desperation. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. As you know, the Dravic Empire has proven resistant to all our diplomatic overtures and military responses. They possess technology we do not fully understand and tactics that seem designed to counter our every move. We are running out of options." Sarah stepped forward, her tablet already displaying data she had compiled over the past 72 hours. She had barely slept since the crisis began, surviving on coffee and the occasional protein bar that Marcus forced her to eat. "Chancellor, with respect, you're not running out of options. You're running out of conventional options. The Dravics are counting on you to respond the way you always have, with careful deliberation and measured military action. They've studied your history and prepared for exactly that response." Ambassador Kelris, who had developed a grudging respect for humans over the years, uncoiled slightly. "Are you suggesting we abandon centuries of strategic doctrine?" "I'm suggesting that doctrine is exactly why you're losing," Marcus said, his tone respectful but firm. "The Dravics have concentrated their forces along the primary trade routes and strategic positions. They expect you to engage them directly or attempt to negotiate from a position of weakness. They have not prepared for something they consider impossible." Vorith felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and dread. When humans used the word impossible, it usually meant they were about to attempt something that would either revolutionize warfare or get everyone killed. Sometimes both. "What do you have in mind?" Sarah activated the holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the contested region. At its center was a massive roiling cloud of crimson and purple energy. The Calrus Nebula. It sits directly between our territory and the Dravic supply lines. Every simulation and every historical attempt says it's impassable. The electromagnetic storms inside are powerful enough to rip apart any ship that enters. The gravitational anomalies are unpredictable and lethal. It's considered a natural barrier. Which is exactly why it's perfect, Marcus continued. The Dravics have left it completely undefended because they assume, like everyone else, that it cannot be crossed. But Sarah has been studying the nebulous patterns for the past 3 years. Sarah nodded, pulling up streams of complex data. The storms aren't random. They follow a pattern based on the interaction between the nebula's magnetic fields and the radiation from nearby stars. I've developed shield modifications that can adapt to these fluctuations in real time. Combined with precise navigation through the less turbulent corridors, we can cross the nebula in approximately 18 hours. The chamber erupted in protests. Delegate Morphix's crystalline body vibrated with alarm. You are proposing to fly a fleet through the most dangerous region of space in the sector based on theoretical shield modifications? This is madness. It's human, Ambassador Zealoth said quietly. Over the past 5 years, he had become one of humanity's strongest advocates on the Council, having witnessed firsthand how their seemingly reckless ideas often succeeded where conventional wisdom failed. They do not see the nebula as a barrier. They see it as an opportunity. Vorith studied the data, his analytical mind warring with his instinct for self-preservation. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. If it failed, they would lose not just ships and crews, but also their best chance at surprising the Dravix. Yet he had learned something about humans over the past 5 years. They did not propose plans they believed would fail. Their confidence was not arrogance but rather a fundamental belief that any problem could be solved with enough creativity and determination. If we attempt this and fail, we will have wasted resources we cannot afford to lose, Vorith said carefully. If we succeed, we emerge behind enemy lines with a relatively small force against their full might. Even with the element of surprise, the odds are not favorable. Marcus smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had heard similar objections countless times before. Chancellor, humans have a saying. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. Our pilots have been drilling for extreme condition navigation since we joined the Galactic community. Our ships are smaller and more maneuverable than yours. And our crews volunteered for this mission knowing full well it might be a one-way trip. We're not looking for favorable odds. We're looking for a chance to change the game. Sarah added, we're not proposing a full-scale invasion. This is a surgical strike. We cross the nebula, hit their primary supply depot at Station Korvax, and withdraw. Once their supply lines are disrupted, their advance will stall. It gives you time to regroup and reinforcements to arrive from the outer territories. The debate continued for 6 hours. Species that had spent millennia avoiding unnecessary risk found themselves considering a plan that violated every principle of cautious military strategy. But the alternative was watching their civilization slowly crumble as the Dravix advanced system by system. Finally, Vorith called for a vote. The measure passed by a narrow margin, with nearly 40% of the council abstaining rather than endorsing what they considered a suicide mission. Sarah and Marcus were given command of a volunteer fleet, 20 ships, mixing human vessels with those from species brave or desperate enough to try the impossible. The preparation took 3 days. Sarah worked around the clock, personally overseeing the installation of the modified shield generators on every ship. The technology was so new that she had to train each engineering team herself, explaining the principles while simultaneously refining the design based on their feedback. It was exhausting work, made bearable only by Marcus's steady presence. On the second night, he found her in the engineering bay of the flagship, the human vessel Determination, surrounded by holographic displays and empty coffee containers. Her eyes were red from fatigue, and her hands shook slightly as she made adjustments to the shield harmonics. Sarah, he said softly, you need to sleep. I need to make sure these shields work, she replied without looking up. If my calculations are wrong, 200 people die in that nebula. Your calculations are never wrong. He moved beside her, gently taking the stylus from her hand. But you'll be too exhausted to think clearly if you don't rest. We need you sharp when we go in there. She finally turned to look at him, and he saw the fear she had been hiding from everyone else. Marcus, what if I'm wrong this time? What if my confidence has finally outpaced my ability? This isn't like the faster-than-light test where it was just us risking our lives. This is. He pulled her into his arms, cutting off her spiral of doubt. They stood like that for a long moment, her head against his chest, his hand stroking her hair. It was the first time they had embraced so intimately, and both of them felt something shift between them. Listen to me, Marcus said quietly. I have flown through asteroid fields, navigated binary star systems, and landed on planets where the atmosphere was actively trying to kill me. I've trusted your calculations every single time, and they've been perfect every single time. This will be no different. You can't know that. I know you. I know that you don't propose solutions unless you've checked them from every angle. I know that you care too much about people to risk their lives on a guess. And I know that if anyone in this galaxy can find a path through that nebula, it's you. Sarah pulled back slightly, looking up at him. When did you become so good at pep talks? I learned from the best, he said with a small smile. There was this brilliant scientist who once told me that humanity's greatest strength was our refusal to accept limitations. She convinced me to fly an experimental ship beyond light speed on her word alone. I figured if I survived that, I could survive anything. She laughed, a sound of relief and something else. That scientist sounds reckless. She is. It's one of my favorite things about her. His expression grew more serious. Sarah, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago. Marcus, please let me finish. If we're going into that nebula tomorrow, I need you to know. These past 5 years working with you, standing beside you while you changed the galaxy, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. But it stopped being just professional respect a long time ago. I love you, Sarah. I'm in love with you. I have been for years. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. She had known, on some level, but hearing him say it made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her simultaneously. This is terrible timing. I know. We're about to lead a mission that could kill us both. I know. And if we survive, it's going to be incredibly complicated. The media scrutiny, the political implications, He kissed her, stopping her logical analysis of all the reasons they should wait. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. I love you too, she whispered. I have for so long. I kept telling myself it was inappropriate, that we needed to stay professional, that the mission came first. The mission still comes first, Marcus said. But that doesn't mean we can't have this too. Humans are good at wanting impossible things and finding ways to make them work. They spent that night together, not in passion but in quiet companionship, lying on the small couch in her office while she explained the intricacies of the shield modifications and he told her about the flight plan he had developed. They fell asleep tangled together, and when the morning alarm woke them, both felt ready to face whatever the nebula held. The fleet assembled at the nebula's edge precisely at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. 20 ships representing 8 different species, all crewed by volunteers who had decided that a desperate chance was better than slow defeat. Sarah broadcast final instructions from the Determination's bridge, her voice steady and confident as she explained the shield protocols one last time. Marcus sat in the pilot's seat, his hands moving across the controls with practiced ease. Beside him, his co-pilot, a Quellan named Varix whose bioluminescent body pulsed with nervous energy, monitored the sensor arrays. Everyone ready? Marcus asked over the fleet-wide channel. 20 acknowledgements came back. Some voices were steady, others shook slightly, but all of them were committed. Then let's show the galaxy what impossible looks like, Marcus said. All ships follow the determination. Stay in formation. Trust your shields. And remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every species that believes there's a way forward. The fleet entered the Caurus Nebula. Immediately the universe went mad. The view screen erupted in colors that shouldn't exist, electromagnetic storms that made every instrument scream warnings. The ship bucked and shuddered as gravitational anomalies tried to tear it apart. Sarah's shields held, but barely, adapting to each new assault with split-second precision. When you put it like that, it does seem manageable. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching stars that no longer seemed quite so far away. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Vidian prophets observed and understood. The humans had done exactly what was predicted, not through violence or conquest, but through an unwillingness to accept that anything was truly impossible. 3 days later, an unexpected message arrived at the Galactic Council. The Vidians, silent since their original warning, requested an audience. This time, when the 3 ancient beings entered the Great Hall, the reception was very different. Every delegate stood in respect, acknowledging the wisdom they had initially dismissed. The lead Vidian approached the platform, and when it spoke, its voice carried a note of something that might have been satisfaction. We return to acknowledge what you have learned. Humans are indeed as we described. They do not accept limitations. They form bonds across all barriers. They turn their flaws into advantages. But you have learned something else, something we hoped you would discover. They do not seek to dominate. They seek to elevate. They take impossible problems and make others believe solutions exist. This is their true danger and their greatest gift. The Vidian turned its attention to where Sarah and Marcus sat among the delegates. Dr. Mitchell, Commander Webb, you have shown this galaxy what humanity represents. Not a threat to be feared, but a catalyst for change. You make others brave enough to attempt the impossible. Sarah stood, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. Honored prophet, we only did what any species would do when faced with extinction. We fought with the tools we had and the creativity we could muster. And that, the Vidian replied, is precisely what makes you remarkable. Any species can fight. Few can inspire others to fight beside them. You turned skeptics into believers and transformed a galaxy that had grown comfortable with its limitations. The prophets departed after that, their message delivered. But their words resonated through the council and beyond. Over the following years, the galaxy underwent a transformation that no one had anticipated. Species that had followed the same procedures for millennia began experimenting with new approaches. Scientists collaborated across cultural boundaries. Explorers ventured into regions previously deemed too dangerous. Artists blended traditions in ways that created entirely new forms of expression. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had shown it how to dream again. 5 years after the Battle of Cowris Nebula, Sarah and Marcus stood in a very different setting. They were in a small chapel on Earth, surrounded by friends and family from a dozen different species. Ambassador Cowris served as the maid of honor, her serpentine form wrapped in ceremonial silk. Commander Varric stood as Marcus's best man, his bioluminescence displaying patterns that represented joy in Quellan culture. Chancellor Vorith officiated the ceremony, an honor that surprised everyone, including Sarah and Marcus. But the old administrator had insisted, saying that their union represented everything the galaxy had become. Different species working together, loving together, building a future together. As they exchanged vows, promising to face the universe side by side through whatever impossible challenges came next, every being in that chapel understood they were witnessing something historic. Not because a human was marrying another human, but because their love story had become intertwined with the galaxy's story. They were the scientists who proved faster-than-light travel was possible. The leaders who crossed an impassable nebula. The warriors who ended a war through audacity rather than aggression. But more than any of that, they were symbols of humanity's greatest strength. The belief that with enough determination, creativity, and love, anything was possible. In the years that followed, Sarah and Marcus continued their work. They led exploration missions, developed new technologies, and trained the next generation of scientists and pilots from every species in the galaxy. They had 3 children who inherited their parents' curiosity and courage, and who grew up in a galaxy that had learned to see humanity not as dangerous outsiders but as essential members of a cosmic family. The Vidian prophecy had been fulfilled, but not in the way the Council had feared. Humans had indeed transformed the galaxy, but they had done so by making it braver, more creative, and more united than it had ever been before. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the ancient Vidians watched and waited, knowing that humanity's story was just beginning. The galaxy had learned to dream again. Now it was time to see where those dreams would lead. The end.